Good morning, everybody out there in YouTube land, all my viewers and chatters and people that'll listen on Memorex later on. Glad to have you with us here on this Monday, the 18th day of July 2016. Well, there's a lot going on in the news over the weekend, and so I've got a bunch of
with us here on
things
this
to
Monday,
cover.
the 8th.
We'll get that thing shut down so I don't echo back on myself. There we go. Not a whole lot going on in the hood this morning. A little breeze blowing. It's approaching 80 degrees. Supposed to get up about 90 today. And I'm going to try to cripple out and mow the yard. I've had some medical issues here over the last few days. I'm telling you, getting old ain't no picnic, and I don't recommend it for anybody. Knees go out, ankle sprain, and wrist sprain, and I feel pretty decrepit this morning, but I'm above ground, and that's what I enjoy telling people. You know, folks will just look at you. It's kind of a common reflex reaction, say, "How are you?" And they don't really care how you are. So I've got so that I just answer them, "I'm above ground." It makes them take pause and think for a minute. And they say, "Well, yeah, that's a good thing." So it's a good way to answer people, gets their attention. Oh my, yeah. Picked beans and peas on Friday, and I got them put up, and so the garden's looking real good. I've got some green tomatoes coming on, so in the next couple of days I'll be frying me up some green tomatoes and all kinds of good stuff coming in out of the garden now. It's starting to kick out real good. I wished I'd got it in a little bit earlier, but hey, it is what it is. Next year's another year. We'll tackle it again. But other than that, not a whole lot going on here, and so we'll just go ahead and jump on into the news. I've got all kinds of wonderful, well, maybe not so wonderful, but informative things to lay on you today. And we'll start out, the first one here is off of the pipeline, and it says, Black militants plan chaos for Republican convention. Well, I've got something trying to play here in the background. I don't know what it is. Let's see, after a day of rage protests fail and BLM supporters whine, France terror attack stole their thunder. And it says, the planned day of rage protest scheduled for Friday, July the 15th, 2016, were supposed to be held in more than 30 cities, failed spectacularly as most of those protests never materialized, and those that did were overshadowed in the news by the attempted military coup in Turkey. Anonymous BLM Day of Rage fail. There are a number of reasons last-minute day of action planned by Hack Twist Group, Anonymous, and Black Lives Matter didn't generate the response two groups were hoping for. Number one, the announcement was made on July the 9th, 2016, leaving less than a week to organize protests in 36 to 37 cities across the nation. And number two, national media interest in the planned protest disappeared in light of the July 14, 2016 terror attack in France, which killed over 80 people, including children. The writing was on the wall, so to speak. On July 14th, BLM supporters and activists were already whining on social media that the attack in France would push Black Lives Matter even further back in the queue, with others stating, "Don't pray for nice, we are fighting a civil war against whites, hashtag BLM." One Twitter user actually came to the conclusion that what happened in Nice was to make people lose attention of Black Lives Matter. Bait and switch tactics take focus off the real planned chaos. Ponder this question: why would Anonymous and BLM attempt to organize protests in over 30 cities, giving themselves less than a week to organize such a massive effort? Answer: classic bait and switch tactic. The media, both mainstream and alternative, would have been irresponsible not to warn people of the potential for violence in their cities, just as the military was told avoid 37 U.S. cities for fear anti-police protests may turn violent, especially in light of what happened in Dallas with the executions of 5 law enforcement officers. They generated headlines and took the focus temporarily away from planned chaos scheduled for the Republican National Convention, which begins Monday, July the 18th, an unlikely, haphazard, and sloppily organized day of rage protests. These were planned long ago. And the article goes on. I won't read any more of that one. If you want to read it, the URL is in the description of the video. So we've got that one. And then the next one that I've got here, if we can get her to pop up on the screen for me. She's a little slow this morning. Well, there we go. This is off BizPack Review. Paramedic describes ordeal when BLM thugs block bridge to lay emergency medical help for a baby. Black Lives Matter claims to care for people and insists their fight is a peaceful quest for what is right. But in Memphis, BLM crew put the life of a little baby in danger because they refused to clear the road for an ambulance. And then my computer acts up on me. Let's see. When BLM protesters shut down the I-40 bridge on July the 11th, it shut off the path to the hospital for a very sick infant. The parents of the child were on the bridge desperately trying to get to the local hospital when BLM crews shut the roadway down. After the parents called for help, police had to escort paramedics the wrong way on I-40 so that they could get to the infant. But that wasn't all. Not only did it take many times longer to reach the stricken child because the highway was shut down by protesters, it took even more precious time to get the child to the hospital because the ambulance had to drive 25 minutes out of the way to get to the hospital because the BLM protesters had shut down the vital direct road to the facility. The paramedics on the scene described the ordeal for local news. One might think this would be the sort of story that the media might love to highlight, but it seems that some members of the media think that BLM protesters should be allowed to break any law they want to get their point across. Take CNN, for instance. CNN reporter Victor Blackwell directly stated that BLM should be allowed to break whatever law to block city streets, and he also said police should stand by and do nothing about it. Clearly, he doesn't understand why the streets need to remain free and open. Naturally, BLM's endangering of the baby's life didn't go unnoticed by social media, and there was all kinds of messages there that went across Twitter. So you could take a look at that one if you want to. It's in the description of the video. And let's see what I've got next here. Well, we'll go with this one. This is off BizPack Review. Former new Black Panther leader promises there will be violence at the GOP convention. And that is today, starting today. The former new Black Panther leader, Malik Shabazz, all but guaranteed there will be violence in Cleveland during the 2016 Republican National Convention. Malik Shabazz said today that there's no way we are going to get through this convention without some kind of violence. Fox News correspondent Mike Tobin reported on Saturday. The radical activist offered a few details of what to expect. From what I know, many of the groups on the left, mainly the white left and others, I know for a fact that there's going to be the blocking of highways, and there's going to be arrests, and there's going to be some things, Shabazz said. I hear that's going to go on next week, he added. The 3-day GOP convention kicks off Monday. It's highly likely there's going to be arrests, there's going to be tear gas, it's going to be happening. Shabazz was not above participating in events himself and agitating the crowd as he organized a Black Unity rally Saturday in downtown Cleveland, according to Cleveland Plain Dealer. Mr. Trump is uncouth racist, but it's not just Mr. Trump, Shabazz told about 100 protesters on hand. It's an indictment on America. That a racist can be a hair away from being in the White House is an embarrassment for America. Not that the race agitator is any more pleased with presumptive Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton and her slick, sly, politicized speech. She isn't that much better, Shabazz said. She'll just kill you nicely. So there's that article. And I might mention for anybody listening that knows Mike Soror, he was supposed to go to the convention, and last night late, he decided against going. So if you were looking for live stream for Mike today on that, it will not be happening from him. I think the Boo 7 might be having something go on because he was at the convention over the weekend or in Cleveland. So you might be able to get something live feed there. But yeah, Mike decided not to go. Apparently his children were pretty upset about the idea of it. So there you have that. And let's see. Then I wanted to bring this one up. This was, I got this on Google News this morning. And of course it's taken the computer a while to catch up to me here. I've got a lot loaded into it this morning. Let's see, this is Baltimore Police Lieutenant Brian Rice acquitted on all charges in Freddie Gray's death. And the computer just is not wanting to cooperate. It's just running slow. I know the feeling, computer. I'm running slow this morning too. Baltimore. Judge acquitted Baltimore police officer of manslaughter and other charges Monday in the death of Freddie Gray, black man who was critically injured in a police transport van. It was the fourth straight trial prosecutors have failed to win in the case. Lieutenant Brian Rice, the highest ranking of 6 officers charged in the case, faced charges of involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and misconduct in office. Williams previously dismissed a second-degree assault charge, and prosecutors dropped the second misconduct charge against 42-year-old officer who was white. And that article goes on, but you get the gist of it. If you want to read the rest of it, it's in the description of the vid. So there you have that. I'm sure that is going to bring on more problems with this Black Lives Matter issue, escalate things, unfortunately, but you know, at least we're forewarned about it. Then, oh my goodness, come on, computer. This one crossed my desk, and so I thought I'd throw this one at you. Well, come on, please, please. Maybe I need to hold my mouth just right. Okay, off BizPack Review, white is no longer allowed to be a color. Left goes nuts over color-coded GOP convention elevators. And Barack Obama's post-racial America, I was probably right the first time, it seems the left sees everything through the lens of color. And now my computer's decided to jump. Okay. Let it catch up to me. All right. The New York Daily News jumped at the opportunity to tag GOP in the grand old segregated party. Its response to a color-coded elevator sign in the Cleveland's Quicken Loans Arena, site of this year's national convention, even including a Jim Crow era photo of segregated water fountains in this story. Wall Street Journal reporter Byron Tao appears to be the first to comment on the white elevator sign in a tweet posted Saturday afternoon, adding that it was being replaced for obvious reasons. And if I can get this to scroll down. Okay, worse yet, many are trying to pin the blame for ill-advised Jim Crow-esque signs on presumptive, well, stop jumping. If you could see what was going on here, you'd laugh. Okay. Sign on presumptive GOP nominee Donald Trump as if the candidate, when not busy campaigning, is also responsible for logistics of the 2016 Republican National Convention. Henceforth, the color white is banned from being used in any color coding process in America due to hypersensitive social justice warriors incapable of seeing beyond skin color. Left-wing zealots armed with hammers in search of a nail. Social media user offered the most likely explanation that there are red, white, and blue elevators, you know, the colors of the American flag the left loathes so much. Fortunately, Tao does not offer any perspective, seemingly stuck on the optics of the one sign. Here's a sampling of the response to the ridiculous charges of racism and segregation from Twitter. This person writes, and Byron Tao, there are white, red, and blue elevators. They represent the flag. Another one says, the white elevators are for immediate loading and unloading of delegates only. There is no stopping in the red elevators. And the next one says, just making an off-the-cuff guess, but there are probably red, white, and blue elevators, question mark. That's pretty much stretching it, trying to make that into a racial issue, removing colored lines at the hospitals next, question mark from that one. Another one says, why? Our hospital uses color-coded elevators. There's red, white, blue, yellow, green, purple, etc. Another one says, just admit that you shared the white elevator for clickbait. It was irresponsible. You know this. Be a man. And it goes on with a bunch of other comments, but there you get the gist of it. Holy smoke. Talk about sensitive people. My goodness, some people need to grow some skin. All right, so we had that one. I can't help but laugh on some of this stuff, but you can't make this up. Let's see. Then we have out of the Freedom Outpost, Pentagon approves UN use of force against American civilians. And the article reads, but the folks at the fact-checking site said these were all being shipped overseas. Then again, they never did have an answer for why there were guys with helmets and construction gear in lots of the trucks, but who knows? Maybe their sources told them the soldiers were stowaways. All kidding aside, with the credible threats from Black Lives Matter and with the information contained in the documents linked to below, the same ones no one reads before they say BS, here's an idea. Since our country is on the line and slipping away fast, how about everyone take a little extra effort to help one another be better informed, myself included. I welcome all the emails I've been getting. And there is a video on that one that you might want to take a look at. It's got UN troops in it with their blue helmets. The militarytimes.com reports the United States has announced its support for a set of principles that gives green light for UN peacekeeping troops and police to use force to protect civilians in armed conflicts. The U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power told a high-level UN meeting Wednesday, focusing on the responsibility to protect civilians, that the United States was proud and humbled to join 28 other countries that have pledged to abide by the 18 pledges. UN peacekeepers from these 29 countries are now required to act in case where civilians are in danger. The Kigali principles are designed to make sure that the civilians are not abandoned by the international community again, she said, recalling how UN peacekeepers left Rwanda before the 1994 genocide and the Srebrenica, I guess, before the 1995 massacre. So there is that article. And we'll move on to the next one. We can get her to cooperate with us. Okay. This is off of PJ Media. French authorities cover up the torture and disembowelment of Paris attack victims. Actually, I had two articles on this, and I chose this one to present that seemed to be a little more, have a little more information to it. It says, what possible reason would the French government have for covering up the fact that many victims of the terrorist attack in Paris at the Bataclan Music Hall were apparently savagely tortured? They not only covered it up, they're still lying about it today. From the Washington Times, says the government committee's testimony translated by Hart Street, a conservative site owned by News Corp, on Friday spotlights beheadings, gouged out eyes, and sexual abuse at the Bataclan Theater last year. The Islamic State terror attacks killed 130 across the city and 89 at the concert venue alone. The translation provided by the website shows France's Commission of Inquiry asking an investigator about the remains of victims on the second floor of the theater. The questionnaire said that the injuries attributed to shrapnel seemed dubious, given that one man had his testicles removed and placed in his mouth. Yeah, shrapnel, I don't believe, does that from anything I've ever seen. Some of the bodies found at the Bataclan were extremely mutilated by the explosions and weapons to the point that it was sometimes difficult to reconstruct the dismembered bodies, a prosecutor said. In other words, injuries described may also have been caused by automatic weapons, by explosions or projections of nails and bolts that have resulted. Would those have put a man's testicles in his own mouth? The committee member fired back. I do not have that information, the prosecutor replied. Why Paris happened. The chief police witness described some of the horror. According to this testimony, Wahhabist killers apparently gouged out eyes, castrated victims, and shoved their testicles in their mouths. They may have also dismembered some poor souls. Women were stabbed in the genitals, and the torture was, victims told police, filmed for Daesh or Islamic State propaganda. For that reason, medics did not release the bodies of tortured victims to the families, investigators said. But prosecutors claimed that these reports of torture were a rumor on the grounds that sharp knives were not found at the scene. They also claimed that maybe shrapnel had caused the injuries. The lies and cover-up are a result of the government and the lies and cover-up are the result of the government not trusting that the people can handle the truth. Horror of horrors, if there's an anti-Muslim backlash or voters demand that the French government do more in the light against ISIS. It's far easier to suppress truth and deal with the reality that the terrorists are operating on another moral plane than the rest of us, which gives them a significant advantage. They don't have to worry about whether a bombing attack will kill civilians. It's part of their strategy for civilians to die. They don't care if we blanch when they execute a prisoner in a particularly gruesome way. They want us to be scared of them. And they have no qualms about carrying out the most gruesome torture on helpless victims. They want our horror to paralyze us. But nations like France, which have done little to assist the U.S. in fighting ISIS in Syria and Iraq, don't want to acknowledge the truth. If they did, they would have to do something about it. So they treat their citizens like little children and try to suppress the knowledge that there are monsters under the bed who want to do them harm. So there you have that article. And let's see, we have this one off Common Sense Show. Critical infrastructure being guarded by Muslim immigrants. DHS paying security firms $1,200 for each Muslim hired. And I got this from an anonymous source. And I'm going to pull up the information here that I was also given to go along with this article, and I'll read this first if I can get it to cooperate with me. I found this very interesting. Well, come on, slow computer. My. It is my and the little wheel goes round and round waiting for the information to come up. Okay, here we go. The information I received along with this article says, according to an anonymous inside source that works for this security firm, they're increasing hiring unvetted Muslim immigrants to provide security locations. Amazingly, the firm is receiving $1,200 from the government to hire these workers. And according to my source, some of these employees barely speak English. So that's what my source had to say on that matter. And we'll go back to the article here. The article reads, we know that Omar Mateen, the Orlando shooter, was employed by G4S PLC, a British security firm whose clients in more than 100 countries include U.S. government, the DHS. It is also known that his firm was part of the larger organization that participated in the catch and release of other than Muslims, OTMs, or excuse me, other than Mexicans, OTMs, at the southern border. The OTMs consisted of people from other Central American countries as well as Muslims from the Middle East. Once these OTMs were caught, they were released into the deep interior of the country without being screened and without supervision. Mateen's firm is technically operating under the direction of DHS on this matter. The catch and release of Muslims at the southern border violates our nation's immigration laws. However, as we witnessed last week with the FBI giving Clinton a get-out-of-jail card for self-admitting criminal activity, our federal government is playing by its own rules and that they are making it up as they go along. The catch and release of these Muslims technically falls under the auspices of the United Nations. Before I get into my personal revelation on this matter, which gravely threatens national security, let's review what is happening to the United States at the behest of the United Nations. 11 years ago, the problem was revealed and ignored. Researcher Paul Sperry, the author of Infiltration, has detailed the type of immigrants that are now imported from the Middle East. Here, Paul Sperry details the threat to communities while appearing on C-SPAN 2, and there is a video to go with this. Sperry cites how we know from the testimony offered from the FBI officials who are in charge of that type of vetting. Immigrants are not being allowed to perform their duties protecting American communities from would-be unscreened terrorists, as expressed in a recent radio interview in which the FBI agents have admitted under oath that they have no idea who and what they are letting into the country. The United Nations and State Department, i.e. Hillary Clinton, are behind this invasion of America. The above is one of the most stunning videos I have seen in some time with regard to the radical, unscreened, extremist Muslim invasion of America. The program has its roots with the United Nations and the State Department. It is a willing accomplice. And the amazing aspect of this revelation is that it is 11 years old. The invasion of America has been going on for almost a generation in its totality. Obama is merely a continuance and fulfillment of its plot to deculturize America and destroy our heritage through unwarranted Muslim immigrants, from which many will not assimilate. Make no mistake, the UN is invading the United States. Antonio Guterres is the head of the UNHCR. He is responsible for sending 9,000 Muslims from anti-America Syria to Boise and Twin Falls, Idaho. This man and his organization is your enemy. His job is the deculturization of European nations and the United States. Leo Holman from WorldNet Daily has another in what is turning into a series of Obama's plan to change America by changing the people. This invasion has impacted 190 American communities, and it is growing by the day. There are over 10,000 anti-American Somali refugees in 10 years who have settled in Minnesotistan alone. In the first 4 months of this year, we have admitted 4,425 Somalians to America, and the numbers are growing exponentially. And amazingly, these immigrants are not being screened, and they are coming to us from areas that are known hotbeds for terrorism. Now that the requisite background has been set, here is who and what is increasingly guarding America's critical infrastructure. An innocent conversation leads to a stunning revelation. I was having a casual conversation with an old friend the other day, and this casual conversation drifted into the area of national security. He told me a firm that he works for called Veteran Security, or VetSec for short. They are tasked with providing security for some of America's most sensitive infrastructure, like power plants. Historically, the firm hired almost exclusively American veterans. However, that demographic is changing. According to an anonymous inside source that works for the security firm, they are increasingly hiring unvetted Muslim immigrants to provide security at these sensitive locations. Amazingly, the firm is receiving $1,200 from the government to hire these workers. According to my source, some of these employees barely speak English. If they're anything That doesn't make any sense, but that's how it reads. Wrong with hiring Muslims to guard American infrastructure. No, so long as they are citizens and have passed an extensive background check, and they certainly should not be part of a program that hires Muslims and then the government pays the employee $1,200 or the employer $1,200 to hire them. And if the government cannot screen these immigrants, neither can this firm. In the following short video, I provide an analysis of what is wrong with this practice, followed by more confirmatory information. And there is a video there, and it says 10% are radicalized. In the recent months, the FBI has acknowledged two critical issues related to Muslims coming into the country under the Refugee Resettlement Plan, which is a plan sponsored by the United Nations. In the following video, CIA Director Brennan affirms that ISIS is slipping into the country amongst refugees. The critical part of the video is located between 3 minutes and 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And so there is that video for you to view on your own. And then there's more to the article. It says more confirmation and conclusion. So when you go look at the videos, you can look at the rest of that article. But there you have the gist of it. I don't think that's anything that we didn't already know, but it is certainly confirmation. So I wanted to bring that to you. Then I had an article off of the News Nerd, American Psychological Association to classify belief in God as a mental illness. According to the American Psychological Association, the APA, a strong and passionate belief in deity or higher power to the point where it impairs one's ability to make conscientious decisions about common sense matters will now be classified as a mental illness. The controversial ruling comes after a 5-year study by the APA showed devoutly religious people often suffered from anxiety, emotional distress, hallucinations, and paranoia. The study stated that those who perceived God as punitive was directly related to their poor health, while those who viewed God as benevolent did not suffer as many mental problems. The religious views of both groups often result in them being disconnected from reality. Dr. Lillian Andrews, professor of psychology, stated every year thousands of people die after refusing life-saving treatment on religious grounds. Even when being told you will die without this treatment, patients reject the idea and believe that their God will still save them. Those lives could be saved simply by classifying those people as mentally unfit for decision-making. Jehovah's Witnesses, for instance, Dr. Andrews continued, will not accept blood under any circumstances. They would rather die than to receive life-saving donor blood. Many religious people believe that they have healing power in their hands. Many believe they can communicate with God using a personal language, which is unknown to anyone but the communicator and God, known as speaking in tongues. Many often tell of seeing spirits. All of these are signs of a mental break and loss of touch with reality. Religious belief and the angry God phenomenon has caused chaos, destruction, death, and wars for centuries. The time for evolving into modern society and classifying these archaic beliefs as mental disorders has been long overdue. This is the first of many steps to a positive direction. With the new classification, the APA will lobby to introduce legislation which would allow doctors the right to force life-saving treatment on those who refuse it for spiritual reasons on the grounds that they are mentally incapable of making decisions about their health. The American Psychological Association says more information about the study and the new classification will be made available to the public in their upcoming journal, which is expected to be released in early August. So it's coming. It's coming. If you have belief in religion, that these people, and I'm using as polite terms as I can when I say these people, deem not of their own beliefs, then they will slap a label on you that says that you are mentally unfit and they will force whatever medical treatment on you that they deem necessary. Another right being removed. You're not going to have the right to make your own medical decisions. Next article. This is off the DC Clothesline. John Kerry spills the beans. Moderate rebels not so moderate. If anyone was wondering just what caused such an abstinential set of public relations performances by State Department spokesman Mark Toner over the last few months regarding the nature of the opposition in Syria and the difference between moderate terrorists and extremist terrorists, the answer is simple. Toner was given an impossible task, which even under the smallest amount of criticism and questioning was destined to fall apart. Indeed, the idea that Arar al-Shan and Jahish al-Islam were somehow moderate in any way or separate from ISIS and al-Nusayra is and always has been a complete farce. Toner's display was thus a result of trying to promote a lie that is easily disproven. In the State Department's defense, convincing Americans of an easy, disproven lie has been a relatively easy task throughout the past few decades. This time, however, the alternative press has let the cat out of the bag, and even a relatively small conglomeration of unrelated alternate news organizations has dismantled a patently absurd falsehood promoted by U.S. government. But if this lie is hanging by a thread when Toner was sweating bullets and dancing about like a frightened clown, Skull and Bones John Kerry has officially snapped it, despite his constant assertion that Jaish al-Islam and Arar al-Shan are completely different from al-Nusayra, al-Qaeda, and ISIS, even if there is some harmless commingling. Kerry has now admitted that these groups are one and the same. In a conversation with Walter Isaacson held in front of an audience on June 28, 2016 at the Aspen Ideas Festival in Colorado, and interestingly enough, recorded by the U.S. State Department, Kerry demolished the entire basis for support and protection of moderate elements of the opposition in Syria. Kerry stated, "Everybody knows the threat. We've all awakened to the news that I just announced to you. How many times have you awakened to it? Vicious attacks perpetuated by a lone wolf or by a group, inspired on the internet or otherwise, from Orlando to San Bernardino to Philippines and Bali. We've seen pictures and we've heard testimony of shocking crimes committed by Al-Qaeda, by Boko Haram, by Josh al-Islam, Arar al-Sham, by al-Shab, Daesh, other groups against innocent civilians, against journalists, and against teachers particularly. But the most important thing, frankly, is seeing if we can reach an understanding with the Russians about how to, number one, deal with Daesh and al-Nusayra. Al-Nusayra is the other group there. Jabhat al-Nusayra, they are designated terrorist groups by the United Nations. And there are a couple subgroups underneath the two designated. Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusayra, Jaish al-Islam, Arar al-Sham particularly, whose brush off and fight with that, alongside these other two, sometimes fight the Assad regime. So Kerry first admits that his moderate rebels are indeed guilty of heinous atrocities that, at the very least, puts them in the same category as Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and ISIS. He admits that these atrocities were aimed at civilians, journalists, and teachers, among others, but all non-combatants. Secondly, Kerry openly admits that Jaish al-Islam and Arar al-Sham are nothing more than subgroups of al-Nusra and ISIS. Not only does he admit that these groups fight together, but that they are inextricably linked together. These statements, while true, stand entirely in opposition to the Western narrative that has been propagated throughout the mainstream media and the halls of Western government. What's the difference between the moderate Ahrar al-Sham and the extreme ISIS? So what's the difference between the moderate terrorists and the extreme terrorists running rampant in Syria today? At one time, we were told there were no terrorists at all. Then we were told terrorists were indeed present, but that they're also moderate, secular, democracy-loving freedom fighters in the country. Now, after the nature of the so-called rebels has been revealed ad infinitum by the alternative and independent press, it is admitted that the fighters in Syria, terrorists, but apparently some are moderate and some are extreme. Of course, they all have the same goal of Sharia. They all hate minorities, Christians, Alevites, Shiites, etc. They all torture, they all rape. We could go on and on. In the world of the West rebels, there is not one shred of difference between any of the armed groups fighting against the secular Syrian government besides the names they call themselves. Still we are told there are clear differences and that the U.S. State Department knows just what they are, only they aren't telling the American people or the Russians or the Syrians or anybody. The moderate terrorists are thus a very mysterious force, a group of which we may speak, but also one that never shows itself. Of course, there are groups that the United States admits are brutal killers, but somehow rationalizes to the public that they are our brutal killers. The U.S. can at times be forced to admit that the group supports as freedom fighters have committed atrocities, rape, murder, torture, and establishment of Islamic theocracy upon unwilling inhabitants. Essentially, the U.S. can admit when pressured that these groups have the same ideology as ISIS, although the State Department will never say these exact words. Thus, it is clear that the designation of terrorist groups as extremists or moderate is obviously based on political motivation and geopolitical designs, not that the nature or action of the terrorist group is in question. If that were the case, then Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Islam, and other groups would easily be listed as terrorist organizations that would subsequently not be covered under the ceasefire agreement. After all, there is no distinguishing characteristic that sets these groups apart from ISIS or Nusra, or other than the name. But when the Russians attempted to remove these groups from the list of non-protected terrorists in Syria, terrorists protected at the insistence of the West, the United States, Britain, France, and Ukraine rushed to their rescue. All blocked the Russian proposal. This is, of course, despite the fact that most of these groups, which make up around half of the Syrian opposition forces, thanks to the Western name changes, have repeatedly worked together with Nusra and ISIS forces. Jaish al-Islam and Ahrar al-Sham have both worked so closely with ISIS and Nusra that the groups themselves are virtually interchangeable. Nevertheless, the U.S. is only digging its own international public relations grave with its refusal to designate known and obvious terrorists as precisely that, particularly when it has launched campaigns of destruction and death across the world on the basis of allegedly fighting terror. The Russians have now forced the Western nations to admit that, despite their rhetoric, terrorist organizations are doing their bidding and have never truly been the targets of NATO forces. While the Western public remains entirely befuddled as to the nature of the crisis in Syria, many do not even know there is a Syrian crisis. Western propaganda has created such a complex and distorted view of the situation that any newcomer or casual observer would find it incredibly difficult to navigate through the lies and deceit. For the rest of the world, however, much of the propaganda is ridiculous and transparent, and for that reason, as well as many others, the United States and NATO are losing more and more credibility by the day. Thus, we have Kerry admitting that Jaish al-Islam and Ahrar al-Sham are terrorists equal to ISIS and Nusra, but refusing to bomb or allow anyone else to bomb them. And that article goes on for quite a ways. I'm not going to read the rest of it. If you want to read it, it's in the description of the vid, so You can check that one out. And let's see, we've got a few more here, so we'll hit this one. If we get it to cooperate with me. This is off of CNN. Turkish president wants to send U.S. rival cleric home. Most of you know that there was an attempted coup in Turkey over the weekend. I covered it with Doug, so you may have caught us doing a live feed there on the breaking news with it. It did not last really all that long for a coup. There has been mixed responses to it over the weekend. I think it was only like maybe 6 hours long. The military against the government, and the government called out the people, and the people surrounded the tanks and brought it to a halt. Although since all this went down, it has come out that the military people that were supposedly pulling off or trying to pull off this coup said that they didn't know that it was supposed to be a coup. They were told that they were being sent out on a drill, and it would appear at this point that the whole thing was staged by Erdogan, the head of the government over there, for some reason, which I don't quite understand. But there have been other rumors that say that the United States is behind it. I don't know. I'm not over there in the middle of it, but I do have this article, so I will read this one. And again, the title of it is "Turkish President Wants U.S. to Send Rival Cleric Home." It says, declaring the government firmly in control, a defiant Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Saturday demanded the United States arrest or extradite an exiled Islamic cleric he blames for a coup attempt that ended with nearly 200 people dead. The cleric, Fethullah Gulen, living in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania, suggested that overthrow and assassination attempts have been staged in the past, though he did not directly accuse Erdogan of deliberately plunging Turkey into chaos. The upheaval exposes deep discontent with the military ranks, but less than 24 hours after the right of violence, questions remained about who was behind it and why they decided to act now. The ramifications of the coup attempt on the political system of NATO, ally and partner in the U.S. fight against ISIS, also remain unclear. Erdogan's call for U.S. involvement in punishing this rival comes after Turkish authorities closed the airspace around Turkey's in Sirik Air Base, where his government allows the American military to launch operations in the air campaign against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. This country suffered a lot in the hands of the Gulen movement, Erdogan told throngs of supporters near his home in Istanbul. I call on the United States and President Barack Obama to either arrest Fethullah Gulen or return him to Turkey, he added. If we are strategic partners or model partners, do what is necessary. Latest example of Turkey's deteriorating stability. Gulen, a reclusive figure who leads a popular movement called His Men, said anyone could have masterminded the coup attempt. Nationalists, the opposition, he denied any involvement. It could be anything, Gulen told journalists through a translator. I have been away from Turkey for 16 years. Whoever was responsible, the uprising is the latest worrying example of deteriorating stability in a country once promoted to the wider Muslim world as model of democratic governance and economic prosperity. Some 14 years after Erdogan's political party swept to power in elections, Turkey teeters on the brink. Let me get a drink here. At the heart of Erdogan's rivalry with Gulen is fundamental division in Turkish society between secularists, some within the country's top military brass, and Islamists, including the president's AKP AKP party. Thousands of military officers have been arrested, including the commander of Turkey's Second Army, General Adim Huduti, I guess. I get into these foreign names, it befuddles me. On Saturday, the Pentagon said U.S. officials were working with Turkey to resume air operations in Sirlik Air Base. In the meantime, U.S. Central Commander is adjusting flight operations in the counter-ISIL campaign to minimize any effects any effects on the campaign, Pentagon spokesman Peter Cook said. It says key air base closed. For now, the American airstrike missions from the base have been halted. And the article goes on like that. And it says the uprising is under control. People are seeking asylum in Greece. And it talks about the surrender. So, you know, there's more on that article if you want to read that one for yourself. And let's see, the next one that I have here is off the BizPac Review. Illinois couple tries to adopt a foster child. Now their Second Amendment rights are being threatened. So this is another way they're going to try to take the guns. If you want to try to foster kids or adopt a child, they're going to stick their nose into your Second Amendment. An Illinois couple have filed a lawsuit claiming they are being forced to give up their Second Amendment rights in order to adopt a child. Kenneth and Colleen Schultz are the parents of 3 children and are seeking to informally adopt a daughter through the state foster care system, but they are battling with the Department of Children and Family Services over rules that they are threatening their constitutional gun rights, Fox News reported. Our family has always owned and used firearms, said Kenneth Schultz, a firearms safety instructor and machine shop manager. No foster parent should have to forfeit their constitutional right in order to be a foster parent. And there is some quotes in the middle of that, and it says the Second Amendment Foundation previously filed other lawsuit in Illinois challenging the state's gun laws. One would think the state would have wised up by now, Gottlieb said, but here we are again to make sure that the state cannot discriminate against foster parents who merely wish to exercise the rights we restored in Illinois. So just another way they're going to try to control us. It's all about control. This is off Daily Caller. It says, new ties emerge between Clinton and mysterious Islamic clerk. Newly released email and lobbying documents filed with Congress reveals new ties between Clinton world and members of the network operated by mysterious Islamic cleric from Turkey. Connections between Clinton and Akloplites of Imam Fethullah Gulen, who I spoke about in an earlier article, could muddle the complex relationship between the U.S. and Turkey, a key NATO ally, if the former Secretary of State wins the White House. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has mounted an aggressive crackdown against Gulen and his followers, known as Gulenists. Erdogan, who was once allied with Gulen, has even personally asked President Obama to extradite the 74-year-old guru who has lived in self-exile in Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains since 1999. Erdogan has accused Gulen of attempting to undermine the Turkish government. Gulen's followers control many Turkish institutions, including media, courts, and police force. Turkey's president, let's see, it jumped on me. In addition to muddying that complex geopolitical dynamic, a 2009 email recently released by Judicial Watch provides yet another example of access being provided to a Clinton campaign and Clinton Foundation donor. In April 2009 message, Gulen, a follower named Gökhan Özkök, asked Clinton Deputy Chief of Staff Huma Abedin for help in connecting one of his allies to President Obama. Özkök was founding board member of the Turkish Cultural Center and part of a network of businesses and nonprofits affiliated with Gulen movement, also known as Hizmet. Özkök served as national finance co-chair of the pro-Clinton Ready PAC. He gave $10,000 to the committee in 2014 and 2,700 to Clinton's campaign last year. He is also listed on the Turkish Cultural Center website as a member of the Clinton Global Initiative, one of the nonprofit arms of the Clinton Foundation. He's been given $25,000 and $50,000 to the Clinton charity. Another link between Glutinous and the Clinton orbit was revealed in a lobbying registration disclosure filed last month with the Senate. It shows that Gulen-aligned group called the Alliance for Shared Values hired the Clinton Connection Podesta Group to lobby Congress on its behalf. The group seeks to lobby for the promotion of peace, tolerance, and interfaith dialogue. The group's executive director is Alp Ashlandogan, a former professor at University of Texas. He has also donated to the Clinton Political Endeavors campaign finance records show. The Podesta Group is a natural choice for those seeking influence with Clintons. The former was co-founded by John Podesta, Clinton's campaign chairman, and his brother, Tony, a major Clinton campaign bundler. Through various nonprofit groups, both Glutinous promote the cleric's teachings, which are relatively moderate and pro-Western. They also involve the Gluten government's money-making endeavor, a vast network of charter schools. Those schools, which number more than 150, have been a source of controversy for the Gulen movement. Federal investigators have reportedly investigated some of the schools for using work as to bring Turkish citizens to the U.S. to teach. In some cases, taxpayer funds were used to pay immigration and legal fees for family members of teachers who worked at the facilities. Funds allocated to the schools have also been funneled to contractors controlled by Turkish nationals with connections to the Gulen movement. In 2011, New York Times article focused on suspicious ties between Gulen schools operating in Texas under the name Harmony Public Schools. Harmony contracted with a company controlled by a pro-Gulen nonprofit called Cosmos Foundation. In 2002, as Landogan purchased property that was later sold to Harmony. He also founded the Texas Gulf Foundation, which has also been awarded taxpayer-funded contracts to provide services to Gulen schools. As Landogan did not return a request for comment, nor did Ozcock, who has affiliations with Gulen-connected education firms SEMA Education and Apple Education Services. The partnerships between the schools and contractors allow taxpayer funds to remain within the Gulen network. Teachers at the school, many of whom are non-fluent in English, are also used to help finance Hizmet, according to one former teacher at the Gulen Institute. The teacher, who is now government whistleblower, told 60 Minutes in 2012 that Turkish teachers are required to return a large portion of their salary to the Gulen network. She said that her Turkish husband, who taught at one of the schools, was required to return 40% of his salary. Accusations of visa fraud and other impropriety, which Gulenists largely deny, have contributed to an increased profit for Gulen, who ended up staying in the U.S. permanently after coming here for medical treatment. And that article goes on, so you can read the rest of that one on your own if you would like to. You get the basic gist of it from that. And then I had one more. This is also involving Hillary. This is out of a BizPack review. Cop accused of widespread corruption ties using Hillary Clinton defense to get out of charges. New York policeman on trial for corruption is now employing the Hillary Clinton defense by saying the charges against him should be dropped because he didn't intend to break the law, just like Hillary. NYPD officer James Grant is in trouble for taking bribes, payments, favors, and special deals from several New York businessmen in exchange for essentially assigning officers to the businessman to serve as their own private police detachment. Grant's lawyer, though, is claiming that just like Hillary, he was unaware he was doing anything wrong, and if Hillary was let off scot-free, he should be given the same legal benefit. It's similar to what the FBI said about Hillary Clinton and why she wasn't charged. Attorney John Marigolo said she was unaware she was committing a crime. Here, there is no crime whatsoever. Officer Grant said a handful of other officers are charged with conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, honest services wire fraud, conspiracy to pay and receive bribes, and the payment and receipt of bribes, according to the New York Post. In one charge, Officer Grant is accused of accepting rides on a private jet and, in at least one case, having sex with a prostitute on the plane. Some of the allegations came to light when the prostitute, Gabby Greco, went public with the claims that she was passed around among several police officers. According to the indictment of Grant and the New York Police Department, Deputy Chief Michael Harrigan, New York businessman Jeremy Rutschberg, and Jonah Recknitz received a private police force for themselves and their friends. And in a previous interview, Greco insisted that she didn't think the plane ride would turn into a sexual orgy and thought she was just being hired to be sexy stewardess. I didn't think it would be as extreme as it was, but then, because I obviously couldn't get off the plane, I had to do what they were telling me, Greco told the Post last month. More than one would try to get my attention at once. They were really creepy and very rude and offensive. It was me on top the whole time, front, behind, side. They seemed really comfortable to take their pants off in front of each other and laugh about it. It's like they've done this before, she said. So this reminds me of somebody saying, don't do as I do, do as I say. Oh, Hillary gets by with it, and now everybody else thinks they can get by with it too. If Hillary jumped off a bridge, you reckon the rest of them would? I'd like to find out. So there you have that one. Lord have mercy, what's it all coming to? I swear. I don't know. Sometimes you just have to just sit and shake your head. Holy smoke. Well, I'll tell you. just makes me scratch my head. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, you know, you go through this news and you think, is this for real? And then you realize it is for real. And you wonder, what on earth is the world coming to? Do people not use their heads for anything besides a hat rack anymore? I think it's just okay to do all this stuff and they're going to get away with it. I think some of that depends on how much money you got to be able to get away with it. Seems like the more money you have, the more you're going to get away with. That's a shame. That's a bad example. Then you have the sheeple that do whatever they're told just because it suits somebody else's agenda. Now that's sad too. Man, oh man. But on the bright side, we're all above ground, aren't we? We still have the ability to think for ourselves in spite of what all the legal eagles want us to think. We still have the ability to improve things. And it starts at home. Improve your home life. Work your way out the door. Improve your neighborhood and your community. Anything that you see that needs a little improvement, work on it. If you have litter in your neighborhood, pick it up. You see somebody wandering around that, you know, don't look like they're too happy, smile at them. They may not smile back, but they'll notice that you smile. Just a little bit at a time. It just takes a little bit at a time. If we all just keep working on it, I think we'll improve it. I really do believe that. So, with all that being said, my head's just swimming with these news articles. My goodness. You want to say that, you know, lock that all up in a little box and just say, okay, that's not reality. My goodness. I'm going to turn y'all loose today, and y'all come back and tell me some stories there in the chat room tomorrow on how you did something today to improve something, anything. You know, go out and do something nice for a neighbor, or do something nice for somebody up at the store. Do something nice for a member of your family. If you haven't done anything nice for yourself in a while, do something nice for you. You deserve it. So we're going to cut this off, say goodbye for today, and we'll see y'all back here at noon tomorrow.